Bruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Beis. 6 lines from the top at the new Mishnah. The Mishnah until now has spoken about a fire that breaks out Chalila on Shabbos. It's permitted to then save Tanakh, books of Torah, Nevi'im, and Kesuvim. We also learned that if there is a tik that is with that sefer, even if there's money inside, one can save the tik together with the Sefer Torah with the money inside. Now our Mishnah turns to a situation of foodstuffs. What can a person save from a fire on Shabbos in regards to foodstuffs? Says the Mishnah, Matzilin Mazon Sholosh Su'udos. It's permissible to save 3 Su'udos for Shabbos. Haroi la'odam la'odam. Haroi lebehema lebehema. That which is fitting for human consumption, 3 sudos for him. In regards to then saving for an animal, one can save the animal food that is going to then be consumed for the animal. Now, that which is 3 sudos, of course, is only going on a person who has a requirement of 3 sudos on Shabbos, whereas the animal, if it only needs to eat once a day, then that's sufficient. The Mishnah goes on to say, Keitzad, how is this so? Nafla deleka b'leili Shabbos. If a fire breaks out on Friday night on Leil Shabbos before he eats the su'udah, then he can take 3 su'udos. B'shacharis matzilim mazon shtei su'ud. If it breaks out in the morning before he eats, then he can then only save 2 su'udos. That which is going to be for the morning su'udah and then the shalosh su'udas. B'mincha mazon su'udah achas. If it breaks out in the afternoon before he eats the shalosh su'udas, then he can save 1 su'udah. Rabbi Yosi oimer la'olam matzilin mazon shalosh sudos. Rabbi Yosi says there's no differentiation when the fire breaks out, whether it's at night, in the morning, or the afternoon. He can always save 3 su'udos. The Gemara now asks right away, Michti, let us see now. Behetero ketorach. We're talking about him being toreach in a heter. We're talking about foodstuffs, which is not an issue of muktzah. Why is there a problem to save only up to 3 sudas and not more? Here we're talking about where a person is taking, let's say, for a fire that breaks out in a home, and we described once before that there are many homes, many batim, that share one chotzer. So here we're talking about where there is even a chotzer that an eruv was made, eruv chatzeros, which is done by taking a loaf of bread from each house and putting it into one house, and therefore then combining the residences to one residence, and therefore one can carry from the house, any house, into the chutzner, one house to another house. So here we're talking about where a person is saving foodstuffs when a fire breaks out from his house and bringing it into the chutzner. So why is it only permissible to then take 3 su'udos on Shabbos? Says the Gemara, because Omar Rave mitoy Adam bohul al mamoinoi isharis le'asi lechabuye. Because a person, when it comes to his monetary possessions, he can become somebody who loses himself out of the distress of the fire, and as he's trying to save things, he will forget that it's Shabbos. So therefore, he's limited to only be able to save, in this case, up to 3 sudos on Shabbos. This also explains that which we saw in the Mishnah, a machloikis. According to Rabbi Yosi, you can always save 3 su'udos. Whereas according to the Tanakama, it depends when on Shabbos is the fire breaking out. And therefore, Rabbi Yosi, who says there's no distinction because there's a svara. Once the Chachamim made a geder, that there's a specific amount that a person can save, he will no longer be nivhal, he never have bahala, and it be a state of panic, to lose himself and forget that it's Shabbos, and then Chalila be over an Isser Deraisa, be Mechabe, extinguishing the flame. So therefore, whether it's at night or the morning or even the afternoon, he can always say 3 su'udos, because that's already a distinguished amount. Whereas the Chachamim, the Tanakama, they say, when do we say 3 su'udos? Only at night. But there's no need to say 3 su'udos if you already ate a Friday night su'udah. And therefore, depending on if it's the morning or in the afternoon, then you can only save either 2 or 1 su'udos. Anyways, the Gemara says as follows: Omer le Abaye, Eloha de Tanya. The Gemara now asks, Abai brings the following brisa. If the rationale is that because a person might be in a state of bahola, of panic, and that's why he cannot save more than just 3 su'udos on Shabbos, because he may then mechabe the flame, extinguish the flame, then ask the Abai with the following brisa: Nishbura loy chavis b'rosh gagoy. If a person has a chavis of wine that breaks on the top of the roof, Mevi kli umeniach tachtel. He can bring a kli, and then it can go ahead and receive all of the droppings of the oil, of the wine from that chavis. Ubilvad shelo yavi kli achar v'ikloy. So long as he does not bring another kli to then catch the droppings of the wine in mid-air, kli achar v'tzarif, and he doesn't bring another kli in order to then put it on the edge of the roof to then again catch whatever is then going to then go off the edge of the roof. Hasamai gzeira ika. Here, what's the gzeira? We're talking about wine. Wine is not muktzah. So why is there a problem to bring different kelim in order to then absorb the wine? Here we're not talking about a fire, therefore there's no issue of being shema yechabe. So why is it a problem to bring more than one kli in order to then take the droppings of this wine? Answers the Gemara, Hachanami gzeira shema yavi kli derech rishus harabim. Because a person might bring, as he's going to then get carried away with the saving of the wine, he might lose himself and forget that it's Shabbos, and then bring a kli through the rishus harabim, being over the iser of hoitzah on Shabbos. Gufa, the Gemara now brings that back to previous statement and expands and gives the hemshech of this brisa. Nishbra lo chavis b'rosh gagoy. If a chavis breaks on a rooftop, mevi kli umenech tachteho. A person can bring a kli and put it underneath to receive that wine which is then dripping out of this chavis. Ubilvat shel yovi kli acher v'yiklo kli acher v'yitzarif. Providing that he doesn't bring another kli to then catch the droppings of the wine in the mid-air and not also to put next to the edge of the roof. Nizdamin, like the brisa continues, Nizdamin le orchin, if he happens to have orchin guests, maybe kliach v'kolei, then he could bring another kli and catch the wine that is dropping from the roof. Kliach and he can also bring another kli to then put it next to the edge of the roof to then catch the rest of that wine that is on the roof. But however, he cannot then do it in the opposite order. He cannot go ahead and take a kli to catch the wine in mid-air and then order orchim. Kli acher mitzaref. Rather, he has to first invite guests, have guests, and when there's a need to then save the wine, then he can then save the wine with another kli by catching it in mid-air. And he cannot do something that will then be a type of subterfuge, where he's not truly needing it for a constructed person, but he just wants to save the wine, but he's not really doing so for the guests in this case. Mishum Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda Amar Marimi. He could do harama. It is permissible to then do so. The Gemara now wants to say that this machlokes that we just saw now between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda, that which the Tanakama says you cannot do harama to save the wine, whereas Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says you can, yes, do harama to save the wine. The Gemara now wants to suggest this is also a machlokes tanoim in the following brisa. Lema plukta Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua kamifli. Let's say that this is a machlokes between Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer as follows. The Tanya, oisoi ve'ez benoi shenaflu labor. If there's a mother animal, let's say a cow and her offspring, a calf, that fell into a bore, and it's Yom Tif. So Rabbi Eliezer oimemales harishon amanas leshochtoi. That you should take out one of them from the boar, because now it's Yantiv, you're allowed to take an animal out in order to shecht it, and leave the other one inside the boar, and then provide it its sustenance so it shouldn't die. But you cannot take two of them out, because both of them out is not necessary. You're only shechting one. So therefore, for Yantiv purposes, you can take out the animal from the boar, and take it out and shecht it. But you cannot take the second one, it's muktzah. That's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. The Brisa goes on to say, Rabbi Yoshua Omer ma'alin es harishon al manas l'shochtoi ve'eno shochtoi. Rabbi Yoshua says to do harama, you should take out the first one from the boar in order that you're planning to show that you are shechting it, but then you don't shecht it. Then you make an excuse and say, wait a second, the other animal inside the boar is more desirable for a meal. And then you do? You take out the other animal. Then you go ahead and take out the second animal from the boar. Whether you want, you can shech the first one, or you can shech the second one. So we have over here in this brisa that states that Rabbi Eliezer says not to do harama, and Rabbi Yoshua says you can do harama. In other words, Rabbi Eliezer says like the Tanakama in the previous brisa, and Rabbi Yoshua would say, like Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, that you can do harama. Ask the Gemara, this is not necessarily a good comparison and allowing us to truly make these Tanoim in line with the previous Tanoim. As follows, Mimai, asked the Gemara, Dilma adkan loy ka'oma Rabbi Eliezer hasom de'efshe b'parnosa. Perhaps Rabbi Eliezer only said his din over there when he said you cannot do ha'arama in the case of saving the wine, is because he said they can have parnosa. But over here, since there's no possibility, therefore not. I said it wrong. Rabbi Eliezer says that Hasan Defshe Parnasa, meaning to say in the case over here by the case of the two animals in the boar. He says since you can go ahead and still give Parnasa to the second animal that remains in the boar and keep him alive, therefore you don't do harama. But in the case of the wine, there's no such thing, and therefore you will lose the wine, whereby Rabbi Eliezer would say that you could do ha'arama. Perhaps. Ve'ad kan loy ka'omer Rabbi Yoshua hasam mishum di'ikat tzar balechaim. And you can say that over here, in the case of the two animals in the boar, Rabbi Yoshua was concerned about tsar balechaim, and therefore he said you can do ha'arama by lifting up the second animal out of the boar, so it shouldn't die in the boar, or have tsar rather in the boar. But in the case of the wine where there's no tsar balechaim, Rabbi Yoshua would say you cannot do ha'arama. So therefore we cannot say the machlokes above between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda would also be the same machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. Says the Gemara Vayta, bringing another brisa in regards to the meals of Shabbos. Toner Rabbanan hitzil pas nikia ein matzil pas hadro. That which we said, if a fire breaks out, you can take three meals, three su'udos. So the brisa over here tells us when is that so? When can you even do harama? According to those who say you can do harama, when can you do harama? Hitzil pas nikia ein matzil pas hadro. If you take pas made out of fine flour, then you cannot afterwards say, I prefer the other pas which is made out of inferior type of flour. Pas hadro, matzu pas niki. However, the opposite is true. If you first took out pas hadro, which is inferior, lesser quality type of flour that the bread is made with, and then afterwards you say, wait, I prefer the greater, the better quality bread, that you could then go ahead and take out afterwards the pas nikia. And the harama is a good harama. And you can save from Yom Kippur to Shabbos. For example, if Yom Kippur is on Erev Shabbos and a fire breaks out, you can go ahead and save for 3 sudas for Shabbos. But if Yom Kippur comes out to be Motzei Shabbos, you cannot go ahead and save on a fire that breaks out on Shabbos for Yom Kippur, since you won't be able to eat until Motzei Yom Kippur, and thereby you can always get food for then afterwards. And certainly you don't have to say from Shabbos to Yom Tov, because certainly on Yom Tov you can go ahead and prepare the food whereby you won't be able to then be without any food, and therefore you don't have a heter to save the 3 su'udos for Yom Tov. V'lo b'Shabbos l'Shabbos habo, and you can't save the 3 sudas from this Shabbos to another Shabbos, because again there's time in between to then prepare food for the subsequent Shabbos. Says the Gemara Vayter, bring another brisa in regards to sudas on Shabbos. Toner Rabbanan shochach pas betanur. If a person forgot the pas that he left in the tanur, they would put dough inside of a tanur, inside of an oven, and they would stick it against the wall of the oven to bake. V'kidesh alav hayom, and then came Shabbos. So he did it Friday afternoon before Shabbos, and he left it there before taking it off the tanur, off the oven. And now it's Shabbos. Says the Brisa Matzilin Mazon Shalosh Seudos. He can save the mazon of 3 seudos, enough bread for 3 seudos. V'omer la'achim, and also tell other people who are around, Bo v'hatzilu lochem, come and save for yourselves the amount of 3 seudos. Ukishahu roide, and when he removes the bread, lo yirde b'mardo ela b'sakin. He cannot remove the bread with a kli that is like a type of that they use in maybe a pizza parlor, where they can move the bread with that type of kli. Rather, they should do it in an unusual way with a sakin, with a knife. Ask the Gemara, why would they have to do that with an unusual fashion, with a knife? Ini, is this so? V'hatani de Rabbi Shmuel, the house of Rabbi Shmuel and the Beis Medrash, they taught, Lo sa'aseh kol melacha. The Torah says you cannot do any melacha. So yotza tekiya shofar r'dias hapasha hi chachma ve'ena malacha. Not only are these things not asur midiraisa, they're also not asur midirabanan, to then remove the bread from the tanur and to then blow the shofar, because these are called chachma and not considered to be any sort of malacha or even doimet to malacha. So why over here you're saying you have to do a shinui by taking out the bread with a knife instead of with the kli that's normally taken out with? Answers the Gemara, Kama de efsher l'shinui mashaninon. Because it's an uvdin dechol, since during the week they remove bread in such a fashion, therefore whatever shinu you can do must be done. Omer Rav Chizda, says the Gemara Vayter, in regards to the Sudo Shabbos, la'oylom, yashkim adam l'hoitzo Shabbos. A person should get up early on Erev Shabbos to then prepare and do his shopping for Shabbos. Shenema says in the pasuk, "V'haya bayam hashishi," on the 6th day, v'yachinu es asher yaviu. They would prepare what they brought, meaning what they brought was from the man, what they gathered in, and it said they gathered in very early in the morning. And since they gathered early morning, and it says together they hechinu, that means that they prepared right away. When was that? La'alter, immediately, and therefore so too. There's a halacha that a person should get up early morning on Erev Shabbos to prepare for the Shabbos Seudos. Rabbi Abba b'Shabbos chayiv adam liv soya al shtei kikros. He tells us that on Shabbos a person is obligated to then make hamoitzi on 2 lechem, on 2 loaves of bread. Dichsiv lechem mishnah. It says lechem mishnah. There's a lechem mishnah, not just 1 loaf but 2 loaves of bread. In other words, the man fell every day in the midbar 1 portion. And on Erev Shabbos, it fell a double portion, one for Friday and one for Shabbos. So therefore, Lechem Mishnah, a double portion, is what's used to commemorate the man that fell in the midbar. And therefore, for every Suda, one should be Botzeya on 2 loaves. Lechem Mishnah, a double portion. Omer Rav Hashi says, Chazina leila Rav Kahana denoke tarti ubotzachada. I saw Rav Kahana, he held 2 loaves, but he only cut into 1 of them. Omar, he said, Lokdu ksiv. It says that they gathered in. Gathered in means that they gathered in, whereby a commemoration for gathering in is the holding of the bread. Therefore, he held the lechem mishnah, 2 loaves together. But in terms of cutting, he held that 1 was sufficient. Says the Gemara Vayter, Rabbi Zeiro have a botza kula sheruse. Rabbi Zeiro would cut into a very large piece for himself, in order to then show his chavivus for the Su'uda. Omar le Ravina Ravashi. Ravina said to Ravashi about the behavior of Rabbi Zeira, V'ho mechsi kerav tanuso. He looks like a glutton by then cutting himself such a large piece, even though he's doing so to then do so for the covet of Shabbos, but he looks like a glutton. Omar le no kivan de kol yoim ovid v'ha'inahu tekovid. Since during the rest of the week he doesn't do so, only on Shabbos Suda he's doing it, and he's cutting a large piece for himself. Then lo mechsi kirav tanuso. Then he doesn't look like a glutton. Rabbi Ami, Rabbi Asi ki mikloi lehu rifto de eruva shori ilave. When they had the bread placed, it was deposited by them. In other words, again, we said that when there's they used to live in situations where there was many houses, many batim that shared 1 chutzner. So they would get together and they put a loaf of bread in somebody's house, whereby that would then show that there's a connection to everybody as being considered to be 1 rishus, whereby they can get carried from one bayis to another bayis, one bayis to the chutzner, and vice versa. So when the bread was placed in the house of Rav Ami or Rav Asi, then when they would make hamoitzi, they would choose to do so on the bread of the eruv. In other words, they wanted to use that bread specifically for the bracha. Amr, they said, Hoyo v'is'abdei bo chad mitzvah, l'is'abdei bo mitzvah achrina. Since one mitzvah was performed with this loaf of bread, namely the eruv chatzeros, then we want to also perform another mitzvah with this bread, namely the Suda Shabbos.